By relying too much on past experience and what was familiar to us can make you far more susceptible to what we call the three deaths of the modern leader. So let's take a look at those. So death number one, self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is when we get in our own way and sacrifice our long-term success in order to maintain our short-term comfort. Self-sabotage can come in many shapes and forms. It can be a desire to not acknowledge a change or a problem and maintain the course, or it can be ignoring the problem and hope that it goes away. It can also be a reliance on your comfort zone or your experience and a desire to stick to what you know and prioritize your short-term comfort. So self-sabotage commonly presents as procrastination and protecting your comfort zone. Now let's look at this with an example from a past client that we work with. Meet Sally. So Sally is the executive director of a large crown corporation. She was hired to get the organization off the ground and manage the administrative side of incorporation. She was excellent at getting the organization rolling. Now, it was after the incorporation stage, once she had to start creating projects and partnerships, that she ran into some issues. She would still prioritize the more administrative tasks rather than move on to the stages of hiring staff, starting projects, and building new partnerships. Now, her board would continually encourage her and push her to hire someone to manage the administrative work so she could dedicate her time and focus into growth and expansion, where the organization needed to be. But the preoccupation she had with tasks and administrative responsibilities was making Sally start to neglect her more pressing priorities and allowing her to delay or ignore the strategic direction from her board. So this is when we were hired to work with Sally to optimize the organization's HR and operational structure. We also began to coach Sally on how to hire and delegate to people that she could trust. We were able to intervene with Sally early enough that her self-sabotage of sticking to the familiar, her comfort zone of administrative work, didn't ruin her credibility and long-term success. We were able to help her become more confident with the unfamiliar. Now let's move on to the second death of the modern leader. Self-preservation. Now, we typically think of self-preservation as an absolute good. I need to protect myself from risk and harm, but not just for me, but for those who depend and rely on me. While it's very true that we shouldn't put ourselves into harm's way and take unnecessary risks, we need to see self-preservation less as a primary objective and more as existing on a spectrum. On the beneficial side of the spectrum, we have actions like self-care, risk mitigation, and preserving our feelings of safety and security. But on the negative side of the spectrum, we have actions like being selfish, apathetic towards others, avoiding risks, and saving face. When it comes to leadership, it's critical to find a balance with self-preservation. You need to be sure that you can take care of your personal and financial future. But on the other hand, as a leader, you need to be willing to take risks, be wrong, make mistakes, have hard conversations, accept blame, and make unpopular decisions. Now, self-preservation commonly presents as a preoccupation with approval or making popular decisions. Now, let's look at self-preservation with an example. So meet Jim. So Jim is the new CAO of a small municipality. Jim came from the private sector, and the council was excited for what a fresh perspective would bring to the job. And Jim was to get started and shake things up and modernize the municipality. So one of the problems that started to present was Jim not fully understanding the difference between the public and private sector. Jim started making mistakes and overlooking common practices. He would blame his staff if he was found out. He soon stopped trying to do anything new if there was a remote chance of controversy or if there was any opposition at all. He would quickly point fingers if anything went wrong, and he would throw his staff under the bus. And we were initially hired by the council to help Jim with the transition when he was first hired. Part of our role was to help Jim get used to the pressures of the public sector and lead his new team through transition. Unfortunately, Jim started to hide his issues from us. We were there to help him, but he was worried that we were really there to report all his mistakes back to council. So he went to great lengths to save face around us and practically threatened the staff not to talk to us. Unfortunately, in this situation, we weren't able to help Jim. He ended up taking stress leave after a few months, and ultimately he quit the job. But this really is not unexpected when people are dealing with self-preservation. Protecting yourself, sacrificing others, and being paranoid about your reputation can be exhausting and lonely. Spending all of your time, all or most of your time, and your mental energy protecting your job doesn't leave much left to actually do your job. And burnout is something that will inevitably happen. Now let's look at the third death of the modern leader, micromanagement. Now, according to the book, My Way or the Highway, the Micromanagement Survival Guide by Harry Chambers, 79% of people have experienced micromanagement in their jobs. 85% said micromanagement negatively impacted their morale. And a shocking 91% of managers are unaware that employees are changing jobs because of micromanagement styles and behavior. When bosses and managers feel out of their depth, it creates a need to scrutinize and inspect everything the team does. If they can't handle the pressure and responsibilities, then they project those feelings onto their staff. So this comes from a lack of trust in one's ability to delegate, causing a need for control. Basically, being comfortable with doing the work and not comfortable with empowering others to do the work. So to ensure the work gets done right, they need to constantly monitor the work or do the work themselves. Now, micromanagement commonly presents as a lack of trust and a need to constantly supervise employees. The micromanager sees the problems as if they can't trust their staff. They see it as a staffing issue, that the staff are incompetent or not motivated or not trustworthy. But the reality is, micromanagement actually comes from a lack of self-confidence in their ability to empower and lead their team. It's easier to process our insecurities outward rather than accept them and deal them inward. Now let's look at the micromanagement through an example. Meet Dina. Dina is the acting CEO of a transportation authority. Dina, who was the operations manager, stepped in as acting CEO when the former CEO retired. Dina was very organized and proficient in her work, and she was committed to becoming the permanent CEO. Now, the CEO's core team were extremely skilled and used to working very independently. But Dina knew this was her one shot to prove her ability to lead, causing her to keep a very firm hand on everything the team was doing. This severely stifled the core team's ability to work, causing massive disengagement and a number of letters of resignation after only a few months. So the announcement of the resignations within the team, which had been a close and highly effective group to date, caused the organization to reach out to us before they officially hired the new CEO. We did an organizational review and determined that Dina could become a great CEO, but was not ready and needed more training and support in order to become a good leader. So we approached the old CEO, and they were willing to come back for a one-year term, largely as a mentor to support Dina's leadership development. This shift allowed the team to give the organization a second chance, and many of the resignation letters were retracted. After a year of Dina in the acting CEO role, under the mentorship of the old CEO, she had a much smoother transition into the full role. Now, the main cause of the three deaths are when we do not feel confident in our ability to lead, when we do not trust our ability to handle what's in front of us, especially the new and unfamiliar. This causes us to overly rely on our experiences, our comfort zone, to only make popular decisions, to ensure we save face, to seek complete control, or to do the work ourselves.